This presentation is titled Kindergarten Literacy Performance Assessment by Riley Rivera. The following presentation will address performance tasks that were created with literacy skills for kindergarten students in mind. The first question that we must address is, what is a performance task? Students are expected to demonstrate new skills, knowledge, and understanding by completing what is called a performance task. This task is an opportunity for students to complete an assignment that exercises the skills, knowledge, and understanding that is expected to be taught within the specific lesson. Teachers, on the other hand, are expected to create a meaningful experience that effectively teaches the skills, knowledge, and understanding that is necessary for the student to be successful in the specific performance task. The next question that we will answer is, how is a performance task created? There are several steps in the process of creating a successful performance task. The first step is to establish a target standard. Next, you must deconstruct the said standard in order to outline appropriate expectations. After that, the educator must create a task that satisfies the given expectations. Next, the educator must then create rubrics and other forms of assessment so they can properly assess the expectations. Last but not least, the teacher must check their own work and measure the effectiveness with the keys to quality assessment reflection. It is important to note that teachers not only assess the students and their ability to achieve the expectations, but they must assess themselves and their instruction to create effective learning opportunities. With all of that being said, now we can begin creating our performance task. First things first, we must pick out a target standard. In this case, the target standard is, with prompting and support, describe the relationship between illustrations and the story in which they appear, specifically what moment in a story an illustration depicts. Let's begin deconstructing our standard. What knowledge do we expect our students to gain from this task? To demonstrate mastery of this standard, students must know that words are used to describe things in a story. Furthermore, students must know that illustrations are used to provide imagery for the written words. Finally, students must know that words and pictures in a story work together to tell the story. These are the expectations in terms of an educator. On the other hand, we need to lay out the expectations for our students to understand so that they can begin to work towards achieving their goals. The following I can statements are the expectations from the views of a student. I can understand that words are used to describe people, places, and things. I can understand that illustrations are used to help me picture what is happening in the story. I can understand that words and illustrations work together to help me fully understand what is happening in the story. The next part of deconstructing the standard is determining what reasoning is expected from this task. In order to demonstrate mastery of this standard, students must be able to use reason to determine what illustrations make sense in what parts of the story. Students must also be able to explain why the illustrations belong where the student placed them. The I can statements, or the task from the student's perspective, I can figure out which words work with the pictures in the story. I can explain why I put the illustrations where I placed them during using context clues. So what performance skills are expected from this task? To demonstrate mastery of this standard, students must be able to describe the correlation between the story and the illustrations. Students must also be able to identify adjectives and use them as context clues to determine the placement of an illustration. The I can statements for this are, I can place an illustration in a story based on the words that I hear, and I can identify what words are used to describe something. These I can statements thoroughly outline what performance skills the students should be able to obtain during this task. So what will students show as a result of their learning? What products can we expect to come from this? To demonstrate mastery of the standard, students must be able to create an illustration that utilizes adjectives provided in a story. Students must also be able to place the illustrations on the correct pages of a story based on the context clues within the story's text. The I can statements are, I can draw an illustration that makes sense in a story using the words from the story. I can put illustrations into a story using the words written in the story. I can identify that pictures and words work together to tell a story. After deconstructing the standard, it is important to create the performance task with the given expectations. This slide represents the performance task that was given to students. The goal of the performance task is to create an illustration for a story based on only the words in the story. After, it is the task of our partner to use the illustration and place it in the story based on the words. The role of the student is to start off by being an artist, illustrating a piece of work for an author that needs an illustrator. After everyone has completed the illustration, the partner will pretend to be the author and place the illustration into the book based on the words in the story. The audience is the author and the readers. What's the situation? An author has written a story but needs an illustrator. Your job is to read and listen to the story and draw a picture for one page of the story. You will use adjectives, words that describe a person, place, or thing, and use them to draw what is happening at that part of the book. Then your partner will pretend to be the author and figure out what page your illustration belongs on. What's the product? The product is the finished book. The book will feature illustrations from all of the students. The discussion time portion of this assignment is a time when students will share the illustrations and explain why they drew them. This is also an assessment opportunity for teachers. The book that will be read is Little Red and the Very Hungry Lion by Alex T. Smith. Included in this performance task is a to-do list, allowing students to look at what they need to do and accomplish their tasks by checking off every individual item on the list. Finally, an adjective definition is included for students to refer to as they complete their assignment. A student rubric is a form of authentic assessment that allows a student to share the feedback of the assignment and describe how they felt about their learning. This is critical to the performance task because students will address what they liked about the task, what they didn't like about the task, and share what they learned and what they feel uncomfortable with. For this specific student rubric, students are asked questions and they answer yes, sometimes, or no. The following questions are what they need to answer. Was I able to use adjectives to draw an illustration? And am I able to explain how my illustrations make sense to the story? Do I understand why pictures are in books? Can I find the words in a story that describe an illustration? As students complete their student rubric, teachers will use them to assess whether or not the student has mastered the expectations. This rubric is the rubric that teachers use in order to grade the students. They will grade them on the following categories: connecting story to illustrations, using context clues, placing illustrations in the story, and describing the connection. Teachers will decide whether the student scored in the distinguished category, proficient, apprentice, or novice. Finally, the teachers must assess their performance task and the learning opportunities that they give to students. The assessment critique summary will allow the teachers to use specific keys and decide whether or not they rated well on this assessment. The first key is the assessment serves a clear and appropriate purpose. For this specific performance task, it was rated a 5. Due to the deconstruction of the standard, the expectations for the performance task were abundantly clear, creating an assessment opportunity that aligned directly with the chosen standard. The knowledge, understanding, and skills expected from the performance task are then appropriately measured by both the student and the teacher. The second key, assessment reflects valued achievement targets. This was rated at a 5. The assessment appropriately reflects the achievement targets of the performance task. The assessment calls for the student to identify descriptive words, define the correlation between illustrations and words, and use context clues to create or place illustrations appropriately. Continuing the assessment critique summary, the third key is design. The design of the assessment is both from a product, the illustration, and anecdotal observation, or the discussion. Students are also able to assess their own skill, knowledge, and understanding, and share their feedback with the teacher. The assessment is primarily open-ended, allowing teachers to use a variety of results to come to an appropriate conclusion. This was rated at a 5. The fourth key is communication. Due to the abundant evidence that is provided via product, self-assessment, and anecdotes, the communication has clarity between parties in regard to the results of the students. The anecdotes provide an enormous amount of evidence that can be used in making instruction decisions that can be communicated between students, teachers, and parents. This is rated at a 5. The final key is student involvement. It is evident that students are involved in the assessment by providing information during the discussion and feedback during the self-assessment. This is also rated at a 5. Let's look back at our performance task. The performance task development process is intricate yet essential to the education of children. Teachers are aware of the expectations and share those expectations with their students. It is important to note that when you share the expectations with students, they are motivated and know exactly what they will be working on and how they will learn what goals they want to achieve. Teachers not only use the performance task as an assessment opportunity for the students, but for themselves as well. With the assessment opportunity for teachers, they will revise their instruction if they realize that it is not appropriate for all students or for the age group they are trying to teach. The above performance task is a positive example of how to develop an effective task that outlines reasonable expectations, is geared toward a specific age group, and allows multiple assessment opportunities for students and teachers.